Is an unexpected result going to always be medical malpractice? I had an opportunity to respond to this question, and this was in the context of a surgery. And as I was discussing this with that individual, I was kind of thinking, I was like, there can be some confusion around this, and understandably so, not only in the surgery world, but you can also see how this can be confusing in the traumatic brain injury world when a baby has suffered an HIE injury. And that is because when a family goes through with everything, a brain injury is definitely something that is unexpected, and it can lead to a lot of questions. And so today I want you to stay with me and let's talk about this. Let's go through some of the analysis to help you understand why not every unexpected medical situation is going to be medical malpractice. Now, when we boil this issue down, what we're getting at is, how do we prove from a medical legal standpoint that malpractice happened? So how do we prove that? Now, when we are discussing this issue, what we're essentially talking about is negligence. And first of all, I want to say that negligence from a legal standpoint might be different than your understanding of negligence in a non-legal context. Negligence in a legal standpoint, it means something specific, and there are four basic elements to negligence, and that is whether there was a duty, and then if there was a duty to be obeyed, whether there was a breach of that duty which caused the damages or the injury or the harm. And in the medical malpractice era or arena, there's also other issues that we have to take into consideration, and that deals with essentially whether there was a departure from the standard of care, which is what caused the injury or the harm. And from a medical malpractice standpoint, to be able to understand what that standard of care issue is, you need medical experts. You're going to need medical experts to give opinions and to give analysis as to what is the standard of care for a specific set of facts and circumstances. And so you're going to need the specific medical expert for, whatever you have going on. If you got a radiology issue, then you're probably going to need a radiologist to be able to tell what the standard of care is. If you've got a child with an HIE injury, with an HIE birth injury, a brain injury, you're going to probably need a whole host of experts to talk about things like standard of care, especially if this was a birth that was done in a hospital, and you may have had labor and delivery nurses that were involved, you have an OBGYN involved, all of these other individuals, a placental pathologist, the list goes on and on. So you're going to need the specific medical expert to give an opinion as to that standard of care. And then you have to show whether that standard of care, whether there was a departure or deviation from the standard of care, which caused causation. Remember when I talked about the original negligence analysis, duty, breach, causation. It's the same thing also on the medical negligence aspect, whether a departure from that standard of care is what caused the injury or the harm. Now, in a lot of medical malpractice cases, causation generally is something that there's a big fight over causation. A lot of times, even if the defendant may admit that there was an injury or that it was harm done, but a lot of times they're going to say, well, we didn't cause the injury. We didn't cause the harm. And so bringing this back over into the realm of a baby suffering an HIE injury, it is imperative that we have a good understanding as to causation. We have to be able to show through the medical records, through the facts and circumstances, we have to be able to tie in that departure from the standard of care. If there was a departure from the standard of care, that is what caused the injury or the harm. And from my standpoint as a birth injury or birth trauma attorney handling HIE, hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy cases, that causation piece is where we spend a lot of time. Because if I'm going to bring this case forward on behalf of this family here in Maryland, and if I'm not in Maryland using co-counsel in another state, if I am going through this, then we've got to have a really good position as to causation. So we're going to want to make sure that genetics, because we do know that genetics in some instances, if there's genetic issues, that can cause a baby to suffer an HIE injury or a traumatic brain injury. If there are developmental issues that are there, those type of things also can cause a baby to suffer an HIE injury, a traumatic brain injury. So we have to be sure that as we're doing these birth injury investigations, as we're going through all this information, and in a lot of instances, these are hundreds and hundreds of pages of records, especially on the birth injury side. When we're going through this, we are putting the pieces together to make sure that we have a strong assessment of causation. And if there are things that I don't think that I can make as an attorney, if I think that there are problems with causation, remember, that's just my legal opinion. Another attorney may look at it and may have another opinion as to that issue, but you just want to make sure that when you're moving forward with these types of cases, whether it be if you call and hire me and my law firm or deal with me and my co-counsel for some of these cases, whether it's us or someone else, you just want to make sure that you have all of your elements pretty much buttoned up and you have the best case that you can push forward for these types of circumstances. I know I talked about a lot in this video today, but I'm trying to help you understand that just because you have an unexpected result, that does not necessarily mean that medical malpractice was the cause of the injury or the harm. Just like I said earlier in this video, you've got to look at things like developmental issues, possibly when we're dealing with an HIE brain injury in that context. You've got to look at whether there are genetics and developmental. You've got to make sure that you've got a good answer for these types of things when you're moving forward with these types of cases. If you have more questions, maybe you're here today because your baby has an HIE injury, you were at the hospital and you just have questions as to what caused this. Was this something that the doctors, the nurses, or the hospital, did they cause this? Or was it something genetic, like I talked about earlier, or developmental? If you have these questions and you want me and my firm to do an investigation for you, what I invite you to do is get your cell. There's a telephone number down below on the screen. Get your cell and give me a call. I talk with families like yours all the time about these types of issues. HIE injuries, cerebral palsy injuries, MAS injuries. These are the types of things that we handle and that we help families with. Make sure when you contact my office and you talk to my secretary that you pick a good date and a time to get on my calendar. That's important so we can know when to call you back and set up our phone conference to talk with you about your baby story. In addition to picking a good date and a time, make sure that you have a good working email address. Sometimes we have to send emails to you, and we want to make sure that you are checking your email address. The email address that you give us, that's an address that you check frequently. Finally, before I get out of here, I practice law here in the state of Maryland. I know from time to time, I'll have individuals that they will contact me. They're in the United States, but they're not in Maryland. And if that is you, just understand that we have to use what we call co-counsel or local counsel. In other words, an attorney in your state. And that's something that we can look to work to help you with. But I just want to make sure that you understand that co-counsel or that local counsel aspect of things if you are not here in the state of Maryland. All right, that's going to be it for today's quick educational video. Again, I'm Marcus Boston, and I'm one of the childbirth injury and medical malpractice attorneys practicing law here in the state of Maryland at Boston Law Group, LLC. Talk with you next time. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.